last seen a few blocks away at a bus stop.
I held out hope until we found her jeans up on Highway 410, knowing she's been who knows where, just disrespectfully thrown somewhere, and she needs to come home and be laid to rest, and I need to... So police have asked people to look through their pictures and video from that night at the fair just to see if she might be in the background.
Last known sighting of Misty is a Pierce Transit bus driver.
When 14-year-old Misty Copsey called her mother to say she missed her bus home from the local fair, no one knew it would be the last time she was ever heard from. Months later, the oversized jeans Misty borrowed from her mom were discovered half buried in the mud near a notorious dumping ground for murdered girls. But the most blood-chilling part of this nightmare wasn't just the sinister suspects circling the teenager, including a man claiming to suffer from convenient blackouts. The horrifying truth is that the police flat-out refused to look for her, maliciously branding her a runaway. What happened next would ignite a fire of rage in everyone who heard the story. The nightmare began on September 17, 1992, at the Puyallup Fair in Washington State. 14-year-old Misty Copsey was the kind of girl who lit up a room. Standing at 5'8", with bright green eyes and blonde hair, she was a straight-laced, athletic student who kept her grades up and stayed far away from the party scene. That evening, she was just a normal teenager enjoying the carnival rides with her best friend, 15-year-old Trina Brevard. But as the night wore on, chaos ensued. At 8:40 p.m., the girls missed the absolute last bus back to their hometown of Spanaway. Stranded in the dark, Misty used a payphone to call her mother, Diana, who was working a night shift caring for an elderly Alzheimer's patient. Misty told her mom not to worry, she was going to catch a ride with an 18-year-old guy they knew named Ruben Schmidt.
And that's when something did go wrong. The 14-year-old missed that bus ride back home and called her mom from a payphone to break the news. After saying goodbye, the last confirmed sighting of Misty came around 9:20 right here in downtown Puyallup.
Diana's blood ran cold. She vehemently forbade it. Diana had recently picked up an extension cord and overheard this grown, 18-year-old man saying repulsive, predatory things to her 14-year-old daughter. She told Misty under no circumstances was she to get in a car with him. She ordered Misty to check her electronic organizer, call around, and find someone else. Misty hung up and the desperate scramble began. At 9:20 p.m., a transit bus driver saw Misty in downtown Puyallup. She frantically asked him for a ride, but his shift was over. He watched her turn around, looking completely distressed, and walk away into the shadows. The very last confirmed sighting of Misty Copsey was at 10 p.m.
A bus driver said he recognized a young girl asking for a ride, only he had to tell her service had stopped.
And I figured when I got home she'd be there, thinking she's in trouble.
A witness saw the 14-year-old walking alone toward the westbound on-ramp of Highway 5 through 12, her head down in the frigid night.
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Tammy. She looked totally distressed. You know, like she was in trouble. She looked like she was crying.
When Diana returned home the next morning to an empty bed, absolute panic set in. She frantically called everyone, retraced Misty's steps, and rushed to the Puyallup Police Department begging for help. This is where the story takes a twisted, blood-chilling turn. Instead of launching a frantic chase through the dark streets to find a vulnerable teenager, the lead investigator, Sergeant Herm Carver, flat out ignored the mother's cries for help. Without a shred of physical evidence, he instantly labeled Misty a runaway. But Carver didn't just drag his feet, he actively sabotaged the investigation, based on nothing but a baseless, unverified rumor from two 8th-grade girls who barely even knew Misty. Carver officially closed the case and completely removed Misty from the NCIC missing persons database. And then he did the unimaginable. Carver went on a local Seattle radio station and publicly humiliated a terrified mother. He broadcasted to thousands of listeners that Misty was alive, that she wasn't missing at all, and maliciously painted Diana as a dishonest drunk who was making the whole thing up for attention because of a cop's terrifying arrogance. Local businesses literally pulled Misty's missing flyers from their windows. The public simply stopped looking. I gotta be honest with you, seeing a cop actively destroy a missing child's case makes my blood boil. How would you feel if this happened to someone you love? This is where the story takes a dark turn. While the Puyallup police were busy gaslighting a terrified mother and telling the media her daughter was just a runaway, a very real, very suspicious target was slipping right through their fingers. His name was Reuben Schmidt. He was the 18-year-old high school dropout that Diana had specifically warned Misty to stay away from. According to official statements and phone records, a stranded and desperate Misty called Reuben a staggering 5 times that night from the fairgrounds. She just needed a safe ride out of the frigid night. Trina, her best friend, later confirmed that Misty even told Reuben exactly how to get into her house to grab cash to pay for his gas, begging him to come get them. But Reuben flat out refused. His excuse: he claimed he was completely broke and his gas tank was running on fumes. He swore he couldn't even make the short, 8-mile drive to Misty's house. But the very next morning, his alibi fell apart in the most chilling way imaginable. When the sun came up on September 18th, Reuben didn't wake up at his own apartment. He woke up at his grandmother's sprawling 100-acre farm in Enumclaw. A farm that was over 20 miles away. How does a guy with no gas money to drive 8 miles miraculously navigate a 20-mile trip into the isolated countryside in the dead of night? When investigators finally bothered to question him months later, Reuben offered a horrifying and incredibly convenient excuse. He looked police in the eye and claimed that the second he hung up the phone with Misty, he suffered a severe medical blackout, a complete memory wipe. He claimed he had absolutely no idea what he did, who he saw, or where he went during those missing dark hours. Reuben's own mouth soon became his worst enemy. Months into the investigation, Frank Rodriguez, Reuben's boss at a local BBQ restaurant, contacted the police with a blood-chilling tip. Reuben couldn't stop talking about the missing 14-year-old. He was casually bragging to Frank, stating with twisted certainty that he knew exactly where Misty was buried. He even mocked the search efforts, claiming the cops were 6 or 6.5 miles off from finding her body. When confronted by police about this gruesome confession, Reuben simply shrugged it off, claiming he only made it up to get his boss to stop asking questions. As suspicion finally began to boil over, police brought Reuben in for a polygraph test. What happened in that interrogation room was bizarre. According to the detective's official notes, Reuben deliberately tried to manipulate the machine. He was intentionally zoning out, repeatedly trying to put himself to sleep in the chair to suppress his physiological responses. The test was ruled inconclusive, but before the police could secure a warrant to tear apart his car for DNA, blood, or hair evidence, Reuben made his most sinister move yet. He immediately got rid of his vehicle. He didn't just trade it in, he sold it directly to a local junkyard where it was instantly demolished and crushed into scrap metal. Any physical evidence that might have proved what he really did during his blackout was destroyed forever.
Her and her friend Trina got on the phone and figured out the bus routes and the times and stuff. And she said, "Mom, I'm 14, I'm responsible, let me go." And I said,
But what no one knew was, the timeline the police had been working with was built on a devastating lie. For nearly 6 agonizing months, Diana and the investigators believed Trina Brevard's original story, that after missing the 8:40 p.m. bus and failing to secure a ride from Reuben,
I didn't want her to ride with him, to call Grandma or somebody else and call me back and let me know how she was going to get home. She said, "Okay, Mom," and I said, "Promise me." She said, "I promise." And I never heard from her again.
Trina simply decided to brave the dark streets and walk the few miles home to Sumner, leaving her best friend behind at the bus stop. It wasn't until King County detectives finally stepped in and properly interviewed Trina that the fragile narrative completely shattered. Trina hadn't walked home at all. Under pressure from investigators, the 15-year-old finally cracked. She admitted that she had been hiding a massive secret because she was terrified her parents would find out. When they were stranded at the fairgrounds, Trina had made another phone call to get a ride out of there. She called her boyfriend. His name was Mike Rayner, and he wasn't some high school kid from their class, he was a 23-year-old grown man. When Mike pulled up into the dark lot in his blue 1981 Ford Escort to rescue Trina, he offered Misty a ride back to Spanaway too. But Misty took one look at him and flat out refused to get inside his vehicle. According to Trina's official statements, Misty was deeply uncomfortable around Mike. She found the older man incredibly creepy and wanted absolutely nothing to do with him, choosing instead to risk the frigid night alone. Misty's survival instincts were dead on. When investigators finally started digging into Mike Rayner's background, they uncovered a blood-chilling secret. 7 years prior, when he was a teenager himself, Mike had been accused of abducting and attempting the unthinkable against an 11-year-old girl at knife point. Although those juvenile charges were ultimately dismissed and his records were sealed from public view, the undeniable shadow of a violent predator hung over him. Misty had sensed that darkness, and it kept her out of his passenger seat. Trina got into Mike's car, and they drove away, leaving a vulnerable 14-year-old girl standing alone on the street. According to Trina, Mike dropped her off at her house shortly after. But what happened next is what makes this case a total nightmare. After dropping Trina off, this 23-year-old man had absolutely zero alibi for the rest of the night. He was completely unaccounted for during the exact window of time that Misty vanished. He knew exactly where he had just left her. He knew she was alone, stranded, and desperate for a way home. And, as if the situation couldn't get any more sinister, Mike Rayner followed the exact same bizarre playbook as Ruben Schmidt. In April, right as the heat of the investigation started turning toward him, Mike abruptly and quietly sold his car. 2 prime suspects, 2 massive gaps of missing time, and 2 vehicles suddenly dumped before police could properly tear them apart for evidence. The nightmare was only just beginning. While the police were busy ignoring the last 2 men to see Misty alive, a completely different, chilling theory was brewing in the background. Enter Corey Bober, a 26-year-old amateur investigator who spent his free time obsessively tracking the notorious Green River Killer. Corey had been meticulously poring over missing persons reports and solved homicides, and he stumbled upon a blood-chilling pattern right in their own backyard. 2 other young girls from Puyallup, 15-year-old Kimberly DeLange in 1988 and 14-year-old Anna Chabatnoy in 1990 had both vanished from the exact same area. Their remains were later discovered just 100 feet apart in a hidden, wooded thicket off Highway 410. Corey looked at the timeline and made a terrifying calculation. Based on the dates, he believed the killer was striking on a specific, commemorative cycle. On September 13, 1992, exactly 4 days before Misty Copsey walked out of the Puyallup Fairgrounds, Corey called law enforcement. He frantically warned them that another teenage girl was going to disappear from Puyallup that very month, and he predicted her body would be dumped on Highway 410. The police completely dismissed him as a lunatic. Weeks later, Corey's mother spotted Misty's missing flyer in a shop window. When Corey saw it, his dark prophecy had come true. He immediately tracked down Diana's phone number and made a call that would permanently shatter her world. He didn't offer comfort. He bluntly told a desperate mother that he had predicted this tragedy, that Misty hadn't run away, and that she was already dead. He firmly stated her body was waiting to be found off Highway 410. Can you even fathom the devastation of holding out hope for your 14-year-old daughter, only for a total stranger to call and say she was the victim of a serial killer and that the cops knew it was coming? Corey didn't stop with Diana. He relentlessly hammered the Puyallup Police Department and the Pierce County Sheriff's Office with his theory, demanding they search the highway. He threatened to go to the media and expose their incompetence. So, how did the police respond to a citizen handing them a potential serial killer pattern? Did they organize a search party? Did they look into the similarities with the other murdered girls? Absolutely not. Instead of looking for Misty, the police placed Corey under heavy surveillance. Knowing he was a small-time weed dealer, they spent 5 days setting up an elaborate undercover sting operation. They literally raided his mother's house while he was sitting at the kitchen table eating dinner, slapped him in handcuffs, and threw him in jail facing years in prison. They didn't do this to clean up the streets, they did it to discredit him. They orchestrated a targeted takedown to permanently silence the loudest voice demanding justice for Misty, all to protect their fragile, baseless, runaway narrative. I'm curious, drop your take in the comments. Does it make your blood boil too? seeing cops put more effort into silencing an amateur sleuth than looking for a missing child.
I really didn't expect to find anything, And
What did you find?
her pants, her socks and her underpants.
The horrifying truth is, the police were dead wrong and the proof was waiting in the dirt. On February 7, 1993, a civilian search party driven by Corey Bober's relentless theories ventured out to Highway 410. While standing near a gravel turnoff by Waco Road, a 14-year-old boy in the search group started poking around a muddy roadside ditch with a large stick. Within seconds, he flipped something heavy and soiled out of the muck. It was a pair of baggy, stonewashed denim jeans with fancy stitching on the pockets. When Diana saw them, all the fight left her body.
This kid, Boy Scout, was digging through the ditch with a stick, and he caught hold of something and he flipped it up on the road, and I looked at it and it was her jeans.
She let out a devastating, inhuman noise and crumbled to the ground. There was absolutely no doubt they were her jeans, the exact pair she had lent to Misty on the night of the fair. The cuffs were still rolled up to accommodate her daughter's shorter frame. Tangled inside the mud-caked denim were a pair of girls' underwear and a single navy blue sock that Misty had worn to match her sweatshirt. Just weeks later, another piece of the nightmare surfaced. Misty's hairbrush was discovered discarded roughly half a mile down the road. But the most blood-chilling detail: those clothes were buried just a 10-minute walk from the exact hidden clearing where the bodies of the two previous murdered girls, Kimberly and Anna, had been dumped years prior. This was undeniable physical proof of foul play. You would think that at this very moment, the Puyallup Police Department would realize their catastrophic mistake, launch a massive homicide investigation, and apologize to a broken mother. You would be dead wrong. Instead of hunting down a killer, Sergeant Herm Carver looked at a mother's agony and doubled down on his own blind arrogance. He had the audacity to write in his notes that the clothes were planted. He maliciously pointed the finger at Diana, suggesting that a grieving mother had taken her own missing daughter's clothing and staged a fake crime scene in the mud just to force the police to act, or to somehow collect on a life insurance policy that didn't even exist. But if Carver was maliciously ignorant, Pierce County Deputy Brian Coburn was downright cruel. When confronted with the mounting, terrifying reality that a 14-year-old girl had been abducted and brutally killed, Coburn delivered a statement so vile it's hard to stomach, completely dismissing the severity of the crime. Coburn coldly stated, "If she's been found to have been murdered, it's unfortunate she met her fate as a runaway." As if writing off a murdered child wasn't sickening enough, he decided to twist the knife even deeper into Diana's shattered heart.
I know there's more than one person that knows what happened that night. I know there's a few people that know what happened that night. And this is their perfect opportunity to unburden themselves and call in anonymously and tell what happened so we can bring Misty home.
He arrogantly declared to Corey Bober that when he finally found Misty, "The last place I'll take her is back to her mother." Drop your take in the comments. Does hearing a cop say that make you as furious as it makes me? No one could have predicted what happened next. When forensics finally processed the tragic pile of clothing pulled from the muck along Highway 410, they uncovered a microscopic but explosive piece of evidence. Clinging to the fabric of Misty's underwear were 3 distinct red paint chips, alongside unidentified hairs and the DNA profile of an unknown male. This was a direct, physical link to the monster who took her, most likely from the vehicle used in her terrifying abduction. Right around the time this evidence was coming to light, a blood-chilling repeat of history was unfolding. On January 10, 1993, less than 4 months after Misty vanished into the frigid night, a 15-year-old girl was walking alone in downtown Puyallup, the location of her terrifying encounter. A mere 5 blocks away from the exact spot Misty Copsey was last seen alive, a man creeping along the street pulled up beside the teenager, rolling down his window and offering her cash for unthinkable favors. When she ignored him and frantically tried to run to safety, he chased her down, violently dragged her into his vehicle, and drove south. He brutally violated her on the side of the road. Then, in a sickening attempt to dispose of the evidence, he drove to a cliff overlooking a steep ravine and callously threw her 20 feet down into the darkness, leaving her for dead. But by a sheer miracle, she survived. She crawled out of that nightmare, found a nearby house with its lights on, and called for help. 5 days later, police arrested a 28-year-old predator named Robert Leslie Hickey. The brave survivor perfectly identified his vehicle down to a piece of trash left on the floorboards. His car, a red Camaro. Let that sink in for a second. You have a violent, predatory monster actively hunting teenage girls in the exact same 5-block radius where 14-year-old Misty disappeared. His chilling signature is abducting them, assaulting them, and tossing their bodies off steep embankments like garbage. And he drives a red car. Meanwhile, investigators are literally holding Misty's underwear covered in red paint chips. This should have been the moment the case was blown wide open. It's a detective's absolute dream lead. The devastating, bitter truth. Law enforcement completely dropped the ball. Despite the unimaginable, glaring similarities, the police never officially treated Robert Hickey as a suspect in Misty's disappearance. They never bothered to test his red Camaro against those 3 microscopic, red paint chips. They never matched his DNA against the unknown profile found on her jeans. I couldn't stop thinking about how this predator was handed to them on a silver platter. While the police were busy slandering a grieving mother and desperately trying to prove Misty was just a runaway, a literal monster with a red car was hunting girls on their very own streets. And they looked the other way. Diana Copsey fought a war that absolutely no mother should ever have to fight. She spent every waking moment of the rest of her life battling, not just the faceless monster who stole her 14-year-old daughter, but the very system sworn to protect her. Tragically, the unimaginable weight of that relentless fight eventually took its toll. Diana passed away without ever getting the one thing she begged for. She took her last breath carrying the devastating, suffocating grief of never finding Misty's remains to finally bring her baby girl home. But the story doesn't end in complete darkness. Breaking through the tragedy is a powerful, hard-fought victory for the truth. Decades later, a brand new generation of detectives took over the Puyallup Police Department's cold case unit. When they finally opened those dusty files and saw exactly what had been done, they were absolutely appalled. These modern investigators publicly expressed intense frustration and righteous anger at how Sergeant Herm Carver maliciously mishandled the crucial early days of the investigation. Finally, after decades of cruel gaslighting, the police officially and unequivocally cleared Diana's name. They validated the terrifying truth she had screamed from the rooftops since day one. Misty Copsey was never a rebellious runaway. She was the innocent victim of a brutal, unforgivable murder. In a profoundly moving effort to right the sickening wrongs of the past, the police department did something incredible for the 25th anniversary of Misty's disappearance. They completely handed over their official social media platforms, transforming their accounts into Misty's voice. For an entire day, they posted from her perspective. They talked about the bands she loved, her favorite foods, her goofy personality, and her shattered dreams. They finally treated this beautiful 14-year-old girl with the profound respect, humanity, and dignity that had been so cruelly stripped away from her in the fall of 1992. Today, the fight for ultimate justice is far from over. Diana's surviving child, Misty's younger sibling, has bravely picked up the torch, breathing new life into the investigation and vowing to keep pushing until Misty's remains are found and laid to rest with the honor she deserves. What do you guys think? Does this ending bring you any sense of relief? Finally, after years of pain and disrespect, the truth was acknowledged, and Diana's fierce love was vindicated. I'll keep digging if there's more to uncover. Thanks for watching and for all the comments. You guys make this worth it.